Hi, I'm Rachel, and welcome to my 2023 mid-year check-in slash freak-out tag. This is a hybrid tag. You've probably seen at least the freak-out tag a little bit on BookTube lately. And in fact, I have mashed together questions from two tags and other people as well. I have a lot of attributions to leave down below in the description. Like a lot of booktubers, I get very excited about this and I want to cram as many books into this to talk about as possible, to talk about this first half of year of reading. And it's going to be a long tag. There's a lot of questions, obviously. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first question on my list is, how many books have you read so far this year? And for me, I just squeezed it in and it finished a couple today. And I can say my number is 58, which I'm very happy about. It means I'm allowing myself to believe I'm reading about 10 books a month. Technically, there's a little bit of overlap with the month before and the month after, but I'm feeling pretty good about this. And after that, we are moving on into the best or favorite books I've read so far. And I'm going to start with In the Land of Israel by Amos Oz. I think this is a book that might not make it to my end of the year top favorites, but I definitely want to have it here right now. I love Amos Oz, especially his nonfiction. And this book was a collection of his reportage in the 1980s when he went to a lot of fringe communities around Israelis and Palestinians and talked to them about what they see about the peace process and their personal, associations with the land and culture and that sort of thing. And then he went ahead and he also gave his thoughts. He is a person who I think thrived a lot on these fraught realities and sort of binary thinking, but for himself, he challenged himself a lot more. And I really loved not only that he, gave voice to these people, sometimes in just, transcribing their interviews, but then he challenged them in his own words or challenged his own beliefs even, and he had something in here about nationalism, which I love so much. I put it on my Facebook. I don't think I've ever heard someone have such similar feelings as me when it comes to nationalism. So yeah, I really love this author and what he does. The second book I'm going to say is my favorite book is Solito by Javier Zamorro, which means I have two nonfiction books as my tops of this half year so far, which is kind of freaky, but to be fair, Solito is a memoir that I loved because it really gave me a lot of fiction vibes. It is a memoir where Zamora went into his past when he was 9 years old, and he took this harrowing trip with a bunch of strangers who were also migrating along with him to the United States. They paid these coyote, people, smugglers, who took them across several borders in this fraught 9-week journey where he was largely on his own, except he did have to make these relationships to survive. And I just feel like, it eschews the politics really. It's so viscerally real about this sort of dramatic experience, and also about the relationships, some of these fleeting in the scope of his life, but so important for that small part of it, these relationships. It was just so moving and touching, and I felt like it really got to what it meant to be human, and I was so grateful the BookTube Prize had me read this book. Next, we're going on to the best sequel, where I am definitely cheating with this one, but this is the last time I think I'll be able to mention The Expanse on one of these tag videos, so, bear with me here, because I'm going to say that Memories Legion is my best sequel, even though these are technically companion novellas to the Expanse series. And it's interesting, though, because they're really interdispersed within the 9 books, like, taking characters or situations from those books and writing a smaller little offshoot about them that technically isn't part of the main series directly, but definitely is related to them. And I love this series. I love the world or worlds that they created and the characters they created. I'm especially thrilled that, this collection, gave more voice to some of those secondary characters. And I'm sad. I think this is going to be my final Expanse book at long last, so I had to put it here. Now I'm moving on to my favorite short story collection so far, and there's something kind of similar about holding up this book, which is Dorothy Parker's Complete Stories, because in fact I have been reading this collection for about a year and a half. And in a way I feel like I'm in love with this collection, less even because of the writing, although I really did come to appreciate Dorothy Parker's writing and her satire, and especially her dashed off stories, but it was the experience of reading them one by one on my Am Reading videos, and in fact that jump-started me to continue doing that, and now for all of my Am Reading videos I'm starting by reviewing a short story, so this is kind of special for me in my booktube journey as well, and I really felt very inspired by this book to do that. Next, we're talking most read genre of the half year, and I'm going to go to my own personal genres and how I organize things on Goodreads with my shelves. And this year, I have a tie. I have read 12 Jewish fiction books and 12 general fiction books, which technically means that I could just say I've read 24 overall realist fiction books, I guess. They're not short stories, because I have other, categories for short stories, and they're not science fiction fantasy, because I have another section for that. So I guess technically I could say 24 realist fiction books, but it's interesting too to think, I think in the past I've read more in one genre than just 12, so maybe that means overall I am diversifying my reading amongst my genres. I'd like to think that. I haven't actually looked at it too closely though. The next question is to talk about new releases you want to read, and this is where I shame myself when I look at some 2023 releases that I physically have with me but I have not yet read. And I'm going to start with two I've had out from the library for a long time, in fact, starting with Sam by Allegra Goodman. Allegra Goodman is technically one of my favorite authors, but I've talked in other videos where I'm a little trepidatious about this book and about the reviews it's gotten, so in a way I've kind of distanced myself when more books have, crowded, my attention. I've been putting this on the back burner, so I'm kind of thinking I might actually, not get to it this year even, although I do ultimately want to get to it. In a similar vein, I'm not sure I'm going to get to Brotherless Night by V.V. Ganeshananthan this year. I technically listened to her on the Fiction Nonfiction podcast, and I have wanted to try her fiction, and I have no real excuse, because ultimately I think this has gotten really pretty good reviews and everything. It's just, again, there's just so much crowding my attention, and so in my mind I kind of linked it to Sam. They came out around the same time, so maybe I'll just be reading them together sometime next year is what I'm thinking right now. But also these next two books are ones I definitely want to get to this year, and this next one I think I'm going to get to in July. I'm going to get to it stat. This is The Secrets of Hartwood Hall by Katie Lumsden. She is a booktuber, talking about Victorian fiction and other fiction as well over on Books and Things, and this is her debut novel, and I was so excited to support her, and yes, I definitely want to get to this stat. And this final book I'll hold up is an AuthorTube book. This is Shut Up and Write the Book by Jenna Moreci, who has a very famous AuthorTube channel here on YouTube. So I wanted to give her craft book a try. I tend to read craft books in November when I'm taking part in National Novel Writing Month, so that's where I have this on my radar right now. All right, and now we are moving on into most anticipated releases for the second half of the year, and I have a lot this year, so hold on to your horses here. Here we go. I'm just going to go in chronological order for when they are going to come out, at least right now. Dates could change, but this is what I have right now. I'm starting on July 18th with Blade of Dream by Daniel Abraham, which is a sequel fantasy novel to his first novel. Daniel Abraham was one of the writers of the Expanse series, so I guess I am actually continuing to talk about the Expanse. The next book I heard about through Olive at a book Olive. This is Mobility by Lydia Kiesling, which is coming out on August 1st. And this is a novel that at least takes place partially in Azerbaijan, which caught my attention because a little over a decade ago, I actually worked briefly at a nonprofit centered around Azerbaijan. So I thought it'd be interesting to read a book set in that country. I think it's going to touch on pertinent current events, although I also do think it's going to span from the past to the future, so it's one of those books. Next, back to sequels, we're going to He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker Chan, which is a historical gender-bent retelling of the Chinese emperor who started the Ming Dynasty. And I enjoyed the first book, so hoping that I'll enjoy this one as well. But now we're getting into two releases in September. In fact, both of them are on September 26th, and I think these two have to be at the top of my anticipated. They are both Jewish fantasy books. I'm so excited. The first one I'll talk about is This Dark Descent by Kaylin Josephson, which is about a magical horse race that gets into some Jewish folklore. I think the golem is going to make an appearance in this one. I think my niece has read some of her middle grade, and this is a YA fantasy novel. And then the second one is adult fantasy I've talked about before, called The Pomegranate Gate by Ariel Kaplan, also coming out on the September 26th. And this one hopefully won't have much to do with golems, because it has to do with Sephardi Jews from Spain and the Spanish Inquisition, and a portal world that opens up around the same time that the characters from the real world are being expelled from Spain. So yeah, I've actually also seen this book being talked about on other channels on BookTube, so I'll be intrigued if it's actually going to make a big splash. I am definitely very, very excited. Moving into science fiction, on October 17th, we have Generationship by Michael Meme, which, as per the title, is about a generation ship. So when I think Thomas at SFF 180 mentioned it for the first time at the very beginning of the year about, you know, science fiction and fantasy coming out this year. And it caught my fancy because it's about a generation ship. And I really love reading about them. I kind of like more of the cultural aspect than the sort of thriller, everything goes wrong aspect that comes up in a lot of these novels, but hopefully this will be okay for me. And finally, I just learned about this one a couple of days ago. It's coming out on November 14th. It is Day by Michael Cunningham. So I am returning to literary fiction from an author who I've read all of his backlists, so want to keep going with that. This one actually gives me some vibes from one of his earlier books, By Nightfall, which I really liked. So hopefully this one will be good for me too. All right, now we're moving on to Biggest Disappointment, and I figured I would actually highlight some BookTube prize books, because not everything can be cream of the crop. So my most disappointing book, and also BookTube prize book, is Secret City by James Kirchick. This book is supposed to be a tell-all about basically the gay culture from World War II up to the 90s, when it was still very secret and in the closet. And Kirchick particularly wanted to tell it from the perspective of the insiders in national government. So we're looking at predominantly conservative cis white men, which is not the usual place we look at for queer culture. But I mean, that would have been fine. That would have been intriguing and interesting, but he treated it like a gossip rag, and I feel like he didn't challenge himself at all to actually look into the ways that these individuals were harming their own community and why. He just, you know, did the usual conservative anti-Soviet talking points. And I just felt like it was so shallow and disappointing. And the honorary mention I'll mention is the memoir that the author wanted to be a biography, called Also a Poet by Ada Calhoun. She wanted to do the tell-all about a famous beatnik poet, Frank O'Hara, that her father actually tried to, write the definitive biography some 40 years earlier, and he failed and, burned bridges with O'Hara's relatives, and she thought she could do better than her father, and then she couldn't. And then this devolved into, the strongest part of the book was about the relationship with her father, but everything else about it just completely didn't hold water for me. And I feel like I understood little to nothing about this particular poetry movement or why it interested her or her father at all. And I felt like she wasn't even honest really about why the biography for her didn't work either. I don't know. So I thought it was disappointing. But to be kind to the BookTube Prize again, I'm going to say for biggest surprise that it is The Escape Artist by Jonathan Friedland, which is a definitive biography that I definitely read earlier this year, and it is a Holocaust biography about Rudolf Verba, who famously was one of the only Jews to escape from Auschwitz, and also brought news about the reality of Auschwitz to the world. Not that, unfortunately, it did much good, but that was his intent. And I was trepidatious at first. I'm always iffy about reading too much about the Holocaust. It's so overwhelming. But in this case, I felt like the writing was just so poignant and so there. And I was also really impressed with how Friedland parsed Verba's complex character, that, he seemed very human. I mean, obviously he is a victim and a hero, but he also seemed very complex and human. This really was a nonfiction book where the author understood his characters' flaws and complexities and actually dealt with them. For favorite new author, I'm going to go with Simon Jimenez, which I can finally say because I just squeezed in his second published book. So now I've read, I think, every at least novel length thing he's published, which is 2 of them. He writes this really epic in scope science fiction and fantasy, which is so original and so unique, and it just spans years and concepts and time, and it's just really amazing. They're both also really unique. The first the debut he wrote is The Vanished Birds, which was science fiction, and then what I just finished was The Spear Cuts Through Water, which was fantasy. And the truth is, I'm not sure I'm head over heels in love with either of them because they're so maximist that I couldn't kind of connect as well with the characters as I hoped to. But it's just so impressive what he's done, and the writing is so beautiful and lyrical that I'm just very intrigued by him, and I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for what he does next. Next, we're getting to the most controversial question, your newest fictional crush. Which people either answer or don't, and I use it as a stepping off point to create a new question, which is to talk about my favorite relationship in the books I've read so far. So the first one I want to mention is Mel and Sharon and the Animators by Caleb Ray Whitaker. This is a book about 2 artists who work together in this frenetic, crazy way for over a decade, and then they have their big break when they release this adult animation about Mel's catastrophic mother. And their relationship as artists living together in New York City is just absolutely chaotic, I think I already said. But I just found it so enticing, just the way that their art and their own sort of crazy attitudes defined their lives together. And that they were part of this world and this culture. There was of partying and drugs, but also of this super creativity. And they're kind of obviously in their own space. They're these middle-aged women who don't have traditional jobs or families, but they had each other, and I really fell for them hard. And as an honorary mention, I think I'm going to talk about Rowan and Ned from Dawnlands by Philippa Gregory, which is the third in her historical fiction series about this English family, or mostly English family in the 17th century, although Rowan is actually an indigenous person from the U.S. or the future U.S., and Ned actually lived in the colonies for a little while, but in this book they are back in England, or Rowan has come with him back to England to fight in another civil war in that country. And what I really was intrigued by, what I liked about these characters is I think ultimately they both really knew who they were, and they both really respected each other and each other's boundaries, and they had this love for each other as well, and that it all jived together, and I feel like it wasn't unbelievable or preachy or anything like that. I really felt very moved by their strength of character together and apart. For newest favorite character, first I'm going to go with Mercedes Martinez in this book, Juventud by Vanessa Blakesley. This book is about a life-changing event which happens for Mercedes when she is a young adult, and she is in the middle of her first love affair, and she is opening her eyes to the world around her. She's this young girl who grew up privileged in Colombia, and then in the late 1990s, and then her lover Manuel opens her eyes to a lot of the injustices in the society, and how someone like her father might actually play a part in them. And there's this thing that happens where this tragedy which happens, which shapes the rest of her life, and the rest of the book is about her trying to deal with that. And I just felt like it was very moving, and it's interesting how, as a young adult, she had her flaws and her narrow thinking, but at the same time what she was dealing with was so empathetic that she, was really trying to better herself, and had a legitimate love of Manuel. And it was just very intriguing to follow her for the next 10 to 15 years about how it shaped the rest of her life, and just what these events do to a character like this. And as an honorary mention, I'm going to talk about Amadea in Empire of Exiles by Aaron M. Evans. This is another epic fantasy novel, the first of a series I'm very excited to continue with when the second one comes out. But anyway, Amadea is the head of an archives, and she is this middle-aged woman who is a caretaker and a nurturer for the people who work under her. And that's just not something you see in much fiction at all, let alone in fantasy fiction. So I was just really thrilled for that. For the book that made me cry, I'm going to go with the first book I read this year, which is Kindred by Octavia Butler. I'm not actually sure it technically made me cry, but it definitely seems to fit the parameters of this question, because the topic is so harrowing. And I mean, that's really easy to say, because obviously this is a book about American slavery, which is on its surface harrowing, but I also feel like the way that Butler tackled it was also very harrowing. It was very much a banality of evil book, where when Dana goes back into the past, she just sees how entrenched it is, and it's not even just about constant fear all the time, it's just about how entrenched it is in society, and just the everyday cruelties that you get used to in that society is the thing that's most harrowing about it. And then, and that's even like beyond going to Dana's personal struggle that, she has this supernatural sort of connection with her slave-owning ancestor when she keeps, getting sent back. So she has some personal struggles as well. But, so there's a lot of heaviness going on here. And I felt like Octavia Butler handled it very well. For the book that made me happy, I'm going with People of the Book by Geraldine Brooks. This is not a perfect book, I don't think, but it is a book that spans time and space, again, mostly going into the past, and we have a conservator who is looking at a real-life Haggadah, which is a Passover Seder order book. And this is a fictionalized account of the history of this famous medieval Spanish Haggadah. And through the character and these backstory vignettes, Geraldine Brooks takes us through several aspects of Jewish history. And I just found it kind of fuzzy and happy, even though actually, a lot of the Jewish history is quite sad and depressing and about persecution. But the way that Geraldine Brooks tied bookishness and our bookish history to the past and to culture just made me feel really happy and fuzzy inside. For favorite review or booktube video, well, I usually talk about a booktube video, but in this case I think I want to talk about a blog post. Because earlier this year I set myself a challenge to read Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr and An Actual Star by Monica Byrne, which are two really similar books that span space and time that seem to just to be a theme for me, but in this case were We're in multiple timelines going from the far past to the far future, and I wanted to compare and contrast how these two authors tackled this cloud atlas sort of reality. So here's the blog post I actually wrote about it. I'm not thrilled with the title. I think I went too in the weeds about trying to specifically describe what the two books are about, but I really do like how the post itself turned out. Next we have Best Film Adaptation I've seen this year, and this is unusual for me. I usually do choose a science fiction or fantasy adaptation, but this year I really do think it has to be Fleischman is in Trouble, which technically came out last year, although I actually watched it this year, and I reviewed it on one of my blogs, and I'll be, linking to blog posts and my reviews down below, book reviews down below. But anyway, I just remember reading Fleischman is in Trouble, the novel, a few years ago, and I was just really taken with the complexity and confidence of Taffy Brodesser-Akner's writing about millennials, like in their 40s, trying to find their way and deal with the realities of shifting relationships and work and childcare and that sort of thing. And the miniseries basically had that same energy, perhaps because Taffy Brodesser-Akner was actually the showrunner for that. And I was really thrilled because it felt like, getting that sort of energy in a new form, and I was very tickled by it. The most beautiful book cover I bought this year, I'm giving to She's Not Home by Lena George. I just love the color scheme on this, the way that the blues and everything else just mold into each other, and the starkness of the white writing. In fact, I even took a picture of this, which I posted on Instagram, and maybe that's part of the reason I fell hard for this cover too, for how the cover also interacted with the reflection and everything else in my picture. But yeah, this is a great cover. Okay, we're getting into the final questions, and I feel like there's going to be a bit of a theme coming through the rest of these. Maybe it's laziness coming to the end, but I legitimately think that these answer the questions anyway. So anyway, for the next question is, what is your next big priority for your reading? And I could talk about more of the books that I'll be reading in July, and in fact I am going to talk about more of them, and that one is Horse by Geraldine Brooks, which I actually got signed at the National Book Fest last year, so I am excited to finally get to it. It's also currently in the running for the BookTube prize, so I'm not sure if it'll be on the ballot for the finals, which I'll probably be reading, but hey, I'll get a head start on it, so that's fun. And similarly, with what is my favorite bookish highlight of the year, I'm going to say starting my Geraldine Brooks backlist reading project, because a few years ago I read The Secret Chord, which is her sort of retelling of the kingship of David in, Iron Age Israel, and then I really enjoyed People of the Book as well, so now I've, checked off her Jewish books, and I'm excited to get to the rest of them. And that leads well into my final question, which is, what books do I need to read by the end of the year? And well, I have 3 more books that are on my Geraldine Brooks backlist, which I haven't read yet, including these 2. This is March and Caleb's Crossing, which are both historical fiction about U.S. culture. And the 3rd book, which I don't have yet, but maybe I'll get for my birthday next month, who knows, is Year of Wonders. So yeah, I actually don't think I'll be getting to these 3 books until December. I, do a lot of pre-planning of my reading schedule, but I am very excited to get to them, and then I'll be, doing a whole video where I talk about Geraldine Brooks and her, and her panoply of books. So stay tuned for that, although that'll actually probably be coming in 2024. So yeah, that about covers it for me now. And again, I'll be leaving links to my Goodreads reviews and Goodreads pages for books and blog reviews, all that stuff, linked down below in case any of these books caught your fancy. And I'd love to hear how you would answer any of these questions, or your thoughts about any of these books as well. So here we are at the end of the half year, and with checking off this video, I'm now going to do my quarterly wrap-up for my writing goals for the spring, and that'll be my next video, hopefully coming out very soon, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching this, everyone, and I'll see you next time.